It doesn't mean you can't be what you want. Like if you want to be the ultimate manly man and do manly things, you can do that. No one's even mad at you. If you want to wear a dress, you can do that. Life is way too short to spend any of it doing anything that makes you that unhappy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gentleman's Brotherhood. I am your host, Juan Sepulveda, and I thank you for taking the time to join me as we explore all these different topics about being a gentleman in the 21st century. And today, I have the great pleasure of being with Zoltan Kaszas. Zoltan, thank you so much for being with us in the Gentleman's Brotherhood.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is, I think it's a cool podcast and appreciated you had me included.
Oh, it is totally my pleasure. Zoltan is a professional comedian. He is one of the best in the game out there. And if you haven't seen his comedy, I encourage you to actually check it out. I'll be putting links here in the show so that you can get some of the highlight reel of what he's all about. Zoltan, I came across your comedy a few years ago. Particularly one thing that stood out was the dry comedy bar.
Dry bar comedy.
Bar comedy. There you go.
Yeah, that special that's the one that got me all the attention, which has been more than I ever expected.
That's great. And the content was great. Your delivery was on point and it was clean. It was something that I could easily show my nana, as you described it in in the comments, and without any kind of problem. Not that there's any problem with peppering some spice in comedy, but I appreciated that being the gateway drug to Zoltan was was clean. I would like to hear from you, considering that there is such a variety of delivery out there in the comedy world. Can you give us a little insight into what it means to you to be able to have a clean delivery, and even in the ones that you have some kind of topics that are perhaps more adult oriented, you still happen to hold some sort of respect. Can you give some insight into that, please?
I mean, as far as like what it can do for you, it just leaves more doors open of places to perform, especially before you start selling tickets and making your own audience. You know, I was a working comedian before I could sell any tickets, if that makes any sense. I was performing at colleges, private events, comedy clubs, of course, too, also cruise ships. And if you're cleaner, it just leaves those avenues open to you. And so that part definitely helps. But as far as like going clean further on, the first comedy special I watched was Sinbad, Afros, and Bell Bottoms from the 90s. And there was like a while when I was in the fifth grade where they just had that special on a loop, it seemed like, on Comedy Central. And I always watched it with my mom. So it was cool, like watching comedy with my mom that was clean, that we didn't have to cringe about, but that was like hilarious. I didn't even think of it at the time that it was the fact that it was clean. It was just something my mom and I watched together. And I guess growing up on that, and then being asked to perform clean on Dry Bar, I did that. And then so the audience kind of expected that when they came to my show, which I'm still balancing out myself. Like, I wasn't necessarily a clean comic before Dry Bar. I wasn't filthy. It was just kind of, if I said something, I said something. I just wanted to be honest and talk about things I thought were funny. And now I'm kind of balancing that between an audience that comes in expecting clean. I don't want to disappoint them. I want to entertain them. But I also don't want it to limit myself from talking about things that I want to talk about. So, and I can find a creative way to do it without being filthy, which I think... I think you end up coming up with more creative words when you try not to use, a bunch of F-bombs. And
I see it.
A lot of times those words end up being a lot funnier. So, I don't know. There's a million ways to do comedy. That's just kind of the way I go at it.
No, that's good. But you don't have a hard stand on, no, I just don't do this or I don't do the other. So, no. Which I like that because it comes across to me, at least, as a more genuine kind of thing. Like, for example, if you were sitting here in my living room and we were having a conversation, the majority of our conversation would be clean. my kids are
Right.
around doing their thing,
Yeah.
whatever.
Especially with your kids around. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how many drinks?
Right. And how many drinks? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you'll hit a spot in that conversation where you'll you'll say something. You'll say a
Sure.
word that makes them prick their ear. And
Yeah.
that's fine. You didn't hurt anybody. You you got your point across. So it's not like it's not a judgmental point of view that, oh, I just don't use profanity. But I am selective. It's in my bat belt, so to speak.
Yeah. It's kind of I mean it's there. Especially when I'm doing a joke for a first time. Usually when I go on stage with a newer joke, it's more of a concept. I don't really have all the beat points. I might not even have a punchline. I'm just like trying to figure it out on stage. I got this idea. And the first words that come to your mind to like get to some funny parts are the four-letter words. And sometimes, they'll come out on stage when I'm like working a bit out. And then the more and more I do it, I'm like, oh, I can do this word, I can do that word. And then it starts to build from there. So I don't have like a hard stance on it, and I definitely don't have any judgments towards comics that work whatever style they work. I feel weird calling it an art form, but it's like the cool thing of comedy is the individuality of it and the fact that you write your own material, you perform it, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that should be impeded upon.
Now, I think right now, of course, we're living through a very polarized era,
Right.
and you have what's described as the cancel culture.
Of
And
course, yeah.
your craft in particular is one that's honed out live in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And that seems like a minefield to me.
Oh yeah.
And can you give me a little bit of insight of when it comes to, like, especially your peers? I'm sure that you see this all the time where you have friends in the business who perhaps are also navigating those treacherous waters
Right.
and happen upon one of those mines and get a little bit of shrapnel, so to speak,
Yeah.
when it comes to that. So, what has been your experience with that, and how have you been able to not restrict the crafting of your jokes and of your routines,
Right.
and still be open to really speak your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think about. I don't know. Like, it's definitely weird to try things out live in front of people. One of my there was a comedy documentary that came out years ago. One of my friends was on it, and he described it as trying to learn to play guitar.
Hmm.
Except imagine that the only place you can learn that there's only one guitar in your town, and there's going to be people that come out and watch you practice that guitar. That's the only way you get to practice. That's kind
Ouch.
of what it's like doing comedy, especially doing new material. You have to do it in front of people, and you kind of have to figure out based on their reaction where you can go and where you can't go. And sometimes, yeah, you go over the line to that audience. Does that mean you went over the line overall? I mean, that's a judgment call.
Hmm.
Um, but you have to do it by trying it out, and that's just how it goes. As far as like cancel culture goes, I don't, I, I don't know if it's real,
Hmm.
and by that I mean I don't know if they kill a career. Especially when it comes to material that people say. Now, there's like the sexual misconduct stuff that even then, like Louis C.K. came back and performed, and he's still performing in big venues before, the world ended. So there seems to be like a timeline that you have to wait for. But specifically speaking about material, I I haven't seen too many people get canceled on that. The one thing I do have an issue on that is like if they look up material you did 10 years ago
Mm.
and then they go, "Can you believe this person said that?" It's like, "Yeah, but that was accepted 10 years ago because the
Hmm.
video clip that you found has a room full of people laughing their asses off."
Hmm.
You know, comedy, I've always said comedy doesn't age like wine. Comedy ages like milk. Comedy is it's speaking on the culture of now.
Yeah.
This is what's acceptable now. This is what's funny now. Now, there will be some jokes, maybe a lot of jokes that are funny 10, 20 years from now. But for the most part, if right now we played Evening at the Improv from the 80s or 90s, even the jokes that aren't offensive, we might roll our eyes going, wow, I can't believe people laughed at that back then.
Hmm.
And that's because, for the most part, comedy ages like milk. It's for that era. So to judge jokes from 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago with today's eyeballs, I think is really unfair.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that, and I pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the political world.
Yeah.
It interests me a lot, and I also see a vein of that there. For example, I am an individual who, if if you give me new data, I'm going to weigh it out, and I'm going to make a new decision based on the new data.
Yeah.
I can't be married to the idea that I had before having a full view of the information.
Yeah.
And in the political realm, that is punished. They place either they show a tweet or back, like back in the days, they'll pull some kind of clip and show a political person sharing an opinion that he has changed his mind on, and now he's a flip flopper. He's
Right.
not trustworthy because look what he said 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago, what was I doing 20 years ago? You know,
Right.
so I can see how that can be unfair. Now, bringing this back to the conversation of the modern gentleman, when I reached out to you the first time was because you had started talking about Harry Styles, who was
Yes.
featured in Vogue magazine. Now, this is a
Right.
big deal because traditionally it's a magazine that only featured females in the cover, and here you have a prominent male figure in the pop music arena in a dress.
Right.
And I loved your response to it. And I'm going to put links to that video because when I heard you speak about it, I practically threw my hands up and it's like, yes, this guy gets it.
Yeah, it wasn't anything new. I mean, because I was such a big fan of basketball in the 90s and Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Dennis Rodman was my favorite player. Like I remember, during a book signing he showed up in a wedding dress, and that was in 96 as a professional athlete. And then so, I mean, for Harry Styles to do it, I think it's cool. That, it's definitely noteworthy, but the fact that it still causes any kind of outrage, anything at 20, 25 years later or 20 years later, however long it's been, it's pretty crazy. Like I don't know. I don't know what the big deal is, but it was interesting in the sense that I scrolled through social media on Twitter, and everyone had the opinion they were supposed to have. Like you were talking earlier about like you're not allowed to grow or flip-flop or have a different opinion. Well, it's seemingly that was the case. Like all the prominent, socially conservative people said that this is killing masculinity, and all the prominent, you know, uh, left-leaning social people were like, "This is beautiful. This is great. This is an expression of this." I I don't know if either thing is true. I definitely don't think it's killing masculinity. I also don't think it's tearing down walls. I think it's something that exists, and it's not a bad thing. I think he's a pop star that did it for some attention. Maybe he wears dresses in his day to day, which is cool too.
Sure.
Um, but it, that was the purpose for it, to get that conversation going. And this idea of masculinity, which I talked about in that clip, in the sense that it's always changed.
Yeah.
Every 25, 50 years, every 100 years, masculinity changes so much, and
Mm-hmm.
the previous generation is always going to think this one's less manly. Like that's just the way it goes. My generation, the millennials, got ripped on a lot, and now we're turning our attention to the next generation. My younger brother, who's 13 years younger than me, now we're ripping on their generation, and then the boomers and are ripping on us. But I know the boomers got ripped on by whatever the generation was before that, and
Mm-hmm.
it just keeps going that way. I
Yep.
mean, even if I was thinking about this, even if you take our military, which is there anyone more masculine than people that fight in war? But if you picture how they fight in war in today, and if you talk to like soldiers from the Revolutionary War, where they stood in rows of three with the dude hitting the drums off to the side, and you just shot the guy that was right there, I'm sure they would look at modern soldiers and be like, "Well, you guys aren't as manly as we are." And it's like,
Yeah.
who's right? Is anybody right? I kind of
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah. And where's the measuring stick? Like
Right.
how are we measuring this? And that's the approach that I really enjoyed because in the Gentleman's Brotherhood, we are exploring this together. We're trying to figure out, okay, yes, we have this romantic idea of what a gentleman is. We want to try to pin this down. And there's also the socially acceptable today idea of what masculinity is. And
Right.
those two are not necessarily the same thing. You have, in my opinion, there are a lot of elements about being a gentleman that are timeless. When you talk about different virtues like integrity and honesty and tenacity, industry, they're not exclusive to just men, but these are virtues that gentlemen should exercise, that they should find, okay, where am I in the spectrum of courage? Am I a coward, or am I a careless person? Like, where do I land on that, and can I improve upon it? Whereas masculinity is an ever changing, ever morphing, nebulous idea that
Right.
some people believe it to be something. Like, I have peers in this whole renaissance, as some people call it, this movement to help men really become familiar with their identity and what it means to be a man in today's society. I have some of these friends that you look at them and they look like you've described it: flannel shirt, camel pants, like ripped out of a hunting magazine.
Right.
Anything that deviates from that, in their opinion, is effeminate, or is
Right.
incorrect, or it's detrimental to society. So I like a quote that you said, and I want to quote you, right? You said masculinity isn't dying, it never had an identity.
Right.
That was perfect.
Yeah, I didn't even realize how like the I was just something I said in the moment. And but yeah, I agree with it. It's not dying. It's just it's ever changing. It's water, it's fluid. It's going to be very different 25 years from now.
Yep.
We're going to, 25 years from now they're going to look back at modern men today and go, what a bunch of boneheads. What a bunch of, macho for no reason, boneheads. And then it's going to change then too. And I don't know. I think we're evolving in that aspect of just like limiting ourselves because we put ourselves in these boxes of men do this, women do that. And I think one of the reasons I've never looked at it that way is because I was raised by a single mom, so I didn't have that male aspect in the house. My mom was like, if you would have said that washing the dishes is woman's work in my mom's house, you were in yeah, you're gonna get hit in the face. You're gonna get hit in the face hard. So I just didn't grow up with that. I don't know, with that in my household.
Yeah. And we see a lot of that. Before we started recording, we kind of touched up on this topic,
Yeah.
because one of the statistics that I found is that in 2015, which is one of the latest studies that I found, it described that 40% of young men that grow up in the United States don't have a male figure to follow in the household. That means not a dad, not an uncle or a grandfather. And usually the response I hear when I mention that, people are like, oh my God, 40%. Yeah, that's tragic if you assume that the other 60% have a good male model in their hand. It could be
Yeah.
a complete jerk, or someone completely inadequate to, raise a young man.
That's so true. Just the other day, I posted this clip. I shared it on Instagram. It was a video of the Ultimate Warrior. It was a pro wrestler from the '90s,
Oh my God,
and
I
he was
remember.
doing some kind of weightlifting exercise circuit clinic with like a bunch of teenagers, and he's just yelling at them, cussing at them, doing all this stuff. It's thoroughly entertaining. It's very funny to watch. But I remember like I watched it, and my first thought was, man, I'm glad I grew up without a dad. Because what if that was my dad just like yelling at me in front of my friends to do like 10 more squats? And I'm like, I could have gone without that. I would have hated that guy if that was in my household.
No, that's funny. And the thing is, like, let's say, for example, I see what you've become, and I'm pretty sure that your mother would be proud to see what you've accomplished and to see how you comport yourself in the public eye, at least. I don't know what you do in private.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In private, I'm just hitting people.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Life
Yeah.
is
My mom's happy with the way I've turned out so far. That's for sure.
awesome, awesome. Well, it's about balance. If you do some punching every now and then, it's all right.
For solid reasons.
Yes, yeah, you need to be justified.
Yeah.
But it is, in my opinion, I think it's important for us who are now perhaps in a public view, and we have a forum and we have a platform to deliver, that there is some sort of guidance we offer. Right now, it's not your responsibility to raise strangers' kids through your comedy, but
Right.
I know that sometimes you'll say something in your performance that makes people think. It makes people consider being courteous and consider respecting other people's opinion. And I think that we do great service whenever we actually use our platform every now and then, at least to sprinkle some of that perhaps we missed or perhaps we've learned after um, long, arduous attempts to find ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard, I think Bukowski said it. He said whether you're trying to chase something creative or find your identity, the best thing to do is don't try.
Mm.
Whatever you do naturally is whatever you're supposed to do. So that doesn't mean don't search for things, but I mean, if you just naturally live in life and just hang, you'll gravitate towards the things you enjoy and you'll act the way you would like to act and try to block out the outside pressures of that, which I definitely agree with. But yeah, it's a lot of I don't know. I think a lot of the pushback from people that push back towards changes in the social aspect really just come from a stance of like, I don't want to learn that. I
Mm.
think that's what it is. I've been talking about this on stage recently where all of the transgendered people and then non-binary and all these different terms, pansexual, all these different terms. I think people hear that and then when people go like this, the other side goes, "Oh, you're offended by this." And it's like, I don't know if they're necessarily offended. I think they just look at it as now I have to learn this new word.
Hmm.
And I think the point of it is no, this is what I've been saying on stage. You don't have to learn this new word. And where this came from was I've heard the definition to pansexual 100 times and it's not sticking. And it scared me. And I was like, oh, is this where I start becoming ignorant because I've stopped learning? And no, I don't have to know the definition of that word. And neither do you. You just have to be nice to everybody. And then you're
Ah,
going to be fine. You're
I
not
love
going to be
that.
canceled because someone's going to run up to me and give me a pop quiz on what non-binary means. They're not going to do that. I just don't treat anyone crampy, no matter what they're wearing or how they're acting or whatever. I just, be polite to everyone and you'll never get in trouble. So that's like the point I'm trying to get across. But I really think that's where the pushback comes from, where someone goes, now I have to learn that.
Hmm.
No, you don't, actually.
Yeah, some people, they see it as an imposition on them, and of course, I've
Right.
seen people who take that approach. They're aggressive about the way in which they deliver the education,
Yeah.
and for someone who is resistant to it, that's a clash that will go nowhere. You will make no headway
Yeah.
by pushing, and the other person's not going to open up to it. So
Right.
education, I think, is the biggest thing. Like
Right.
nothing makes you understand something better than actually either engaging in it or seeing it or meeting someone who's gone through it. Like I have friends that have gone through life experiences that I don't identify with because they're so far removed from what my experience is. But when I
Hmm.
see their struggle and when I see their suffering and when I see their victories, when I see their joyous moments, then I get it. I'm like, now I know. And I can
Right.
be more empathetic. I can put myself in their shoes.
Absolutely. I feel like if if more of us took that approach where we take a step back and go, well, I don't know what this person's been through. I know what I've been through. And maybe if they knew, they would have a different opinion of me and vice versa. I think if more of us did that, then it would be a lot better place, but we're not doing that because
Uh,
we communicate on these.
Yes.
This is what separates us. It's not one-on-one conversation.
Hmm.
There was a clip a friend of mine sent me. It was George Carlin from an interview in '92, and the interviewer goes, "So do you hate people?" Because he always would crap on society, you know.
Hmm.
And he thought about it and he goes, "No, actually, I love people individually. When you talk to someone individually, I love them. There, you can get along with them, you can find common ground. It's when people start getting into groups and start stepping back into their beliefs, and once they start clamoring together, that's when I start hating people." That's what Carlin said.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because individually, I've talked with people that I don't see eye to eye with on maybe anything, but we'll find
Hmm.
something to talk about. We can talk about football, we can talk about beer, we'll figure it out.
Yep.
But once people start backing into groups, everyone has to stay along their lines of their ideological lines. Like, this is what we believe, this is what you believe. Now we fight and change nobody's minds.
Yeah, creating that separation is, in a sense, it's, if you do it unconsciously and you see that grouping of, and I'm sure you're in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you hear people talking about, you Californians. I'm in Florida. You know
Yeah.
what happens in Florida politically.
Yeah.
You know how my,
And it's a swing state. So it's always every 4 years it comes down to Florida and Ohio and Pennsylvania, like a handful of these states that are real swing states.
yep,
And California, I mean, all the time, oh well, you liberals in California, and it's like, actually, California, we always vote blue, but there's a lot of conservative people here.
of
We
course.
They vote blue because of the density of population in San Francisco and Los Angeles. San Diego is actually pretty conservative because it's a military town.
Mm.
So we have all the military branches are represented here. There are a lot of liberal people here too, but it's a lot of conservative folks. And I don't know. I don't think California is so one-sided as they believe.
Neither are people. Like
No.
that's the whole point. It's like, and you say it perfectly. Okay, talk one on one to people. Like, get to know people, and you'll see you'll have way many more things in common than you do differently.
Yep.
Like, one expression that I've heard, especially in the last 4 to 6 years, oh, well, they hate America. Like, really? They hate America because they want to pay a fair wage to people?
Right.
They hate freedom because they want to give equal opportunity to other to other individuals. They don't hate America. They don't hate freedom. They're not trying to destroy the republic. These are
Right.
people that love their children, that want a better future for them, that perhaps are invested in their communities, and they want their communities to thrive, and
Right.
they have a way of thinking of how to achieve that. So, I love that language, in a sense, the language arts, communication,
Yeah.
comedy, poetry, music, all of these art forms are part of the solution to help people get to know one another better, and treat each other with dignity.
Right. That's a very well, very well said. Yeah, everyone's. I don't know. I don't think we're at war with each other. I think people are just everyone's trying to better their situation and their kids' situation and their community's situation. And that doesn't have to come at the expense of someone else's community. And I don't think it does.
Mhm.
But they've definitely I mean, the way certain politicians talk, they've definitely set it up that way. That way, if that group does this, that means you guys go down. And it's
Mhm.
like, I don't think that's the way it is. But I understand where that fear comes from.
Fear. That
Yeah,
that's
that's a
that
lot of it. It's
that's the
fear.
key.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, and that's a perfect segue to, we talked earlier about the fact that whenever you're out there crafting your jokes and putting together your sets, a lot of it is happening out in the public eye.
Yeah.
You're going to a comedy store, you're going to a comedy location, and then you're throwing out some of your ideas in the rough. And I'm an artist by trade, and I do paintings, and it would be like me showing everybody my sketches for to see their face reaction or to hear their comments as I'm trying to craft the final painting.
Right.
That's brutal.
Yeah, in a way it's good and bad. It's bad because of the pressure. You're like, oh, I hope people like this idea, and you have to present it confidently, and then based on their reaction, you adjust accordingly. But it's also good in the sense it's like, well, what if I just stayed inside and wrote my new hour and I just performed it once and that was the finished product. Well, I don't have any audience feedback building this hour.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance a lot of this is going to suck because I need their response to know, oh, this punchline worked. This tag really worked. The way I worded this is better than the way I used to word it before. All of that you need people for that. So in a way, yeah, that it's very different from music and other forms of art where you need people there reacting to it so you know what to change, what not to change, where to dig deeper, where to word something different to dig deeper,
Mm.
and things like that. Yeah.
No, that's cool. But you touch up on a word there that I'm trying to drive into, and it's confidence. I'm
Right.
confidence when it comes to me trying to help other men in their in building their character and building themselves up as better gentlemen. Confidence comes into play, and it's not something that comes easy to a lot of people. So
Sure.
you have this experience with confidence in your craft, and is there a bleed into your personal life? How do you also build that confidence, and how have you built the confidence to the point where you are right now, which you look you look very confident and prepared and ready to face the world whenever you're up on stage. So give us a little insight into how you've got to that point.
Well, as far as being confident on stage, it's just the years I've been doing stand up.
Mm.
I started in 2006, so I've been doing it for a long time. I'm very comfortable on stage in front of people. I still get nervous putting out new jokes because I don't know the response. So that part is maybe not nervous and like a little anxious. You're like, I want to get it out, but I don't know how they're going to respond. I hope they like it, but if they don't, maybe I can go this way. As far as in person. I don't. I'm sure comedy had something to do with just my confidence going up in person, but I also think that that comes with maturity and time. Obviously, I'm a lot more confident than I was as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old than I am at 33. But I'm sure going up on stage for all these years has had something to do with it. I'm actually not that outgoing in public. Like if I was, let's say, at a house party where I didn't know anybody, I'm not just gonna stand up and start like commanding the room. I'm actually kind of a wallflower, and I like to listen.
Mm.
Um, and then I, kind of work my way into a group and then start talking. But I'm actually kind of a shy, reserved person by nature. Um, a lot of times when I used to have day jobs, and they would find out I do comedy, their first response was, "Really? You? You barely say 4 words." And I was like, "Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I open up when I'm on stage." But then once I get to know my coworkers, get to know the setting, get to know everyone on a one-on-one level, then I can open up and start cracking more jokes in that kind of setting.
It's funny because it reminds me when I was growing up, I changed schools regularly.
Oh, so did I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one comment that I would get from teachers after a few years, or towards the end of a new year in a school, they would say, Juan, you've changed. Like you weren't like this. Because I would become very, I was a jokester, and
Right.
I would just prank people, and I would joke around, and I was very outgoing. But at the beginning, I was very reserved because I didn't know anybody and I was opening up. But it was that whole opening up to people. When people get to really know you, oh yeah, this guy's not so uptight. He's actually a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the same way I was. I went to like 5 different elementary schools, so it was, every little bit we'd move and I'd have to make new friends. And it was always a little slow in the beginning, but then once I
Mhm.
started to open up, I was always able to connect with people, and I'm sure that helped with, I don't know, communicating. Because also one of the things I like to do when I do comedy, especially when I talk about anything political or social, I never try to just say this side's right and that side's wrong.
Mhm.
I always try to ride this line where I get my point across, but I also don't bury the other side. I go, I see where you guys are coming from because of this. And I actually think that came from when I was a kid moving to different elementary schools and having to make new friends because sometimes you'd meet, not that kids are very opinionated about politics or social or anything, but they have their different personalities, and being able to meld into that and play off of one person's personality as opposed to another's,
Mm.
and being able to get along with both. I think is something that I learned by being forced to have to make friends in, all throughout the years.
And that takes skills. It takes that overcoming the fear. And I
Right.
think of my children have been fortunate that they've been in the same school basically all their life,
Oh
and they
yeah.
grow with the same kids and everything.
Correct.
But sometimes I think, man, they could really use a little uh uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Let's put them in this, let's shuffle them up a little, put them in a different kind of school, get them to know new people, get to
Right.
understand a different kind of culture. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. I need to pull on that thread a little bit more and analyze that whole
Yeah.
dynamic.
One of the best things that happened by pure accident is that I went to two very different school districts. When my mom and I moved to Pittsburgh, my mom was a live-in housekeeper for a very wealthy family. So I lived in a really rich neighborhood in Pittsburgh, even though we were poor. And I went to a really great elementary school. It was a public school, but property taxes there were high, so it was really nice. And then we moved to San Diego, and we lived at first in like a middle class community. But I could tell the school wasn't as nice as the one I went to in Pittsburgh. And then after that, we moved to a really poor community, and I went to a really crappy school. And I was like, wow! So I learned that not every kid in America is getting the same education. It's definitely based on what neighborhood you live in. But I learned that by actually being in it,
Wow.
and I think that was a good thing because if you go to one school and you grow up there, and let's say it's a really good school, you go, well, everyone had these opportunities. Why aren't you where I'm at? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
it's not the same at all. And you get to interact with different kids from different backgrounds, and I think all of those things really helped kind of shape my perspective that everyone thinks they're right because of the setting they grew up in. And it's just because they don't know each other on that level to understand that, yes, people do have a different upbringing than I did. And it just takes a few minutes of conversation.
Yeah. And having that empathy, I think that's having that understanding that there are people that are in a different circumstance than us.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have been talking a lot about this, the fact that property taxes and all that is what determines the quality of school.
Right.
I see that as so backwards in our
Yeah, it
country.
does not make it. I don't know why it's not even,
It is
but
so twisted. I really hope it. If I have anything to do with it, I would put as much pressure as possible to make sure that there's an equality of opportunity from the educational standpoint.
yeah.
I think that's crucial for the future of this country, because it, like you said, it's unfair. These, you think, oh well, everybody had the same opportunities. Not even close. Not even
No.
close. What kind
Yeah.
of music class did you have? Have you seen the music class my kids have?
Yeah. Dude, I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, this was many years ago, but early 90s, I'm at the very rich elementary school, O'Hara Elementary School, which is in the Fox Chapel School District. Um, we had a music class in first grade. So we would go to a different classroom, we were given instruments, and we also had a vocal class. And our parents were given progress reports on how our singing voices were developing.
What?
And yeah, and this is a public school. This isn't a private school. This is a public school. And we also had an art class where we had a kiln and we were making like cool like mugs and stuff for Mother's Day and all this stuff. And so I went to that school for a couple of years. Then we moved to San Diego, and it was just there was no music. There's no progress reports on our vocal cords developing. It was such a big difference. And then when we moved to the trailer park, and I went to a school that was predominantly poor Mexican families. And I was like, that school was falling apart. It had been built in the 50s. It was like I noticed it. I was like, this school is falling apart. It's not that the teachers didn't care.
Hmm.
It's just that they just didn't have, they didn't have the resources and everything. And really, there was such a big difference of what I learned going to the rich schools and what I learned going to the poor schools that it was very noticeable. So yeah, we don't get to all start on the same foot, and that is, especially when it comes to public education, that is something we
Hmm.
should switch.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something definitely worth looking at.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to switch gears, and I wanted to delve into, you mentioned earlier outside pressure. And you recently, well, right now it's already at 1.65 million
Yeah, Modern
viewers.
Male. Yeah.
Modern Male, great. I'm gonna put links in it so people can check it out. But when it reached a million views, you actually celebrated with a cake,
Yeah.
and which I thought was funny. When I first started watching, I'm like, "There's no way this dude's gonna eat that whole cake."
I couldn't. I almost went into a diabetic coma
I
halfway
don't,
into it. Like, I can't eat any more of this cake.
I don't doubt it. I
Yeah.
don't doubt it. But what you did is that you actually went into the comment section to read people's comments about your comedy. Now,
Right.
I'm not a comedian.
Right.
I'm a podcaster, YouTuber, and
No.
I know better.
Right. You're not supposed to do that.
But you knew better, and it worked because you read some very, very funny stuff in there.
Yeah.
But what I want to hear is how do you actually deal outside of that one video? I want to hear,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that whole outside pressure or social feedback that we get now with social media, in light that the majority of the children today, that's their gauge for their own worth. That's
Yeah. And that's so crazy. Because I'm
get
I'm a
anxious.
33-year-old adult, and there's some comments that come through sometimes that were like, well, I don't want to say ruin my day, but at least ruin a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grown. Like, I pay tax. I'm an adult. I can't imagine if I was getting those comments as a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old. They're not equipped to emotionally to deal with that.
Yeah.
Being old enough, I am, and it still bothers me sometimes. Sometimes I'll read a comment and I'll be like, man, I really want to, and then I'm like, why am I even wasting my time responding to this? Every once in a while I will if I can find a funny angle,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part I ignore it. But the way I deal with it, especially with the comments on Modern Male, most of the comments were really good. Like, if you look at the thumbs up to thumbs down ratio, it's going great.
Nice.
So like the bad comments I read, someone left a comment under that video and go, "Oh, why didn't you read the good ones?" And I'm like, "Well, because those aren't funny." Very much appreciate all the good ones. Those are the ones that made me able to read the bad ones. Because if they
Mm.
were all bad comments, I wouldn't have been able to read that. I would have closed this laptop and then went and hid in a corner. But thankfully, it was more positive than negative. Um, I'm not a dad. I don't have any kids, and I'm sure it's impossible. But if I was a dad, I would try to keep them as far away from social media as possible until they're older. I don't, take the, because kids criticize each other anyway, but
Yeah.
at least have them do it in person,
No, but
and
they're
at least be
brutal.
able to, yeah, of course they're brutal. I was mean in middle school. I was horrible because in middle school I found out I was funny, but I didn't know how to be funny without there being a victim. I needed
Wow.
someone to poke fun at. And I liked the response because all the kids would laugh, but I would always also see the look in that kid's eye that I made fun of and be like, "Ugh, that hurt."
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on this, you don't have that. You don't see like the damage you're doing to somebody.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, you don't see their eyes. You don't like if I walk up to someone and say they look ugly and they should walk backwards to save society. Like, it's funny to just joke about here, but if I actually went up and said, I don't know, I couldn't
That'd be
say that
horrible.
into someone's face because I
Yeah.
know that I can assume what that would feel like, and I would
Yeah.
feel like getting punched in the face emotionally,
Yeah.
and I'd
At least
rather not make someone feel that way.
At least not in Puerto Rico. You can do that. You can pull that. I grew up in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, yeah, that probably wouldn't fly over too well.
No, no,
Yeah, probably you're probably gonna get punched. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how kids are supposed to deal with it. As an adult, I always try to focus on the positive comments too. But what if I release a video where it's all negative comments?
Hmm.
I got to deal with that,
Yeah.
And I guess the way I try to rationalize it is if someone really felt this way, they'd come up and say it to you in person.
Hmm.
And it's like, who does that? That's rarely ever going to happen. They're
Yeah.
just comments.
But I
Sometimes
wanted to hear
people are,
that.
yeah, sometimes people are having a bad day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll leave a bad comment and then I'll realize, why did I leave that comment? Oh, it's because I was in a bad mood.
Mhm.
And then I took in this video with my bad mood, and then I'm sitting on the toilet telling someone I've never met that I hope he's dead in a ditch or something, and then it goes off that way. So,
And I'm glad that you mentioned that the whole fact that not all the comments are negative. And
no.
And we do have a negativity bias where any negative comment is going to weigh heavy on us.
Yeah.
We're social creatures. Like, we're designed to be able to function in a society where the majority of the people like us. Otherwise, we're out of the tribe in the jungle by ourselves trying to, pick some berries or something.
Right.
And the way that that's translated here in social media, for example, especially now during the pandemic where people are fully digital, in many aspects, that's their reality. Their reality is Toby commenting, dude, seriously, those are the biggest ears I've ever seen. And it's like,
now they want to cut their ears off.
Yeah. I was okay with my ears before Toby said something, but now it's like, oh, I want to pinch them back and go to Dr. Surgery.
Right. Oh, all the plastic surgery. That's something I've been talking about on stage recently because I'm a big fan of the body positive movement, body positivity. I just wish it would include the face. Like, for some reason, the body positivity movement ends right here. It ends on the neck down and then face up. Oh, yeah, get your face fixed. You need to fix your eyebrows. You got to fix your lips. Your nose is wrong. Your ears stick out. I got one ear that sticks out. You got to fix all that. But face down, neck down, you don't have to worry about it. It's like, why aren't we including the face? Yeah. I've seen so many bad, plastic surgery jobs where I'm like, there's no way that looks better than what your regular face would have just ended up looking like. But once again, that's social pressures. That's outside coming in.
Yep.
And there's a lot to do with that. I mean, ageism and just, people picking on each other, I guess.
Yeah. And I hope that people see the importance. We're all different. And we have to see beyond those superficial things. Right. I personally, I am one that I like imperfection in, when I see an individual, and I want to see, like, you haven't noticed yet, but notice now, this eyebrow is higher than this one. I'm not going to say it anymore.
Oh, I see it now.
Well, there it is. Like, if there was a caricature of me, it would have this puppy up all the way to the top. And I've made peace with that. Like, that's how my face is arranged. And I'm going to rock it.
This ear sticks out a little more than the other.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, it happens.
And well, that's how it happened. And, for the young men out there that perhaps are listening or watching this, it is okay for there to be some aspects of you that other people might find funny or might find a little different. The aspect is, try to your very best to be healthy. If the problem here is that, I have 30 more pounds than I need, even though nobody's complaining about my weight, and how horrible it would be that they take credit for it then.
Oh, God.
At the end, it's like, you see what I did for you? You needed that.
That would be worthy of a one-way flight to wherever that person lives. I'm going to have a talk with you if you're really taking credit for it. Good Lord. Yeah.
Man, so, Zoltan, I wanted to say thank you so much for being a gentleman, for accepting my invitation to come and have this conversation.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me on your podcast, man.
Oh, it is definitely my pleasure. And I admire what you do. I appreciate what you're doing. And, thank you for taking the time to actually bring some of these things to light in a funny, insightful way that's going to make people think about it. Harry Styles wearing a dress, listen, it's okay. If he wants to wear a dress, that's fine. And if you don't like men wearing dresses, well, then don't wear dresses, right?
Yeah.
Don't hate people that wear dresses.
Yeah.
And stop being that guy that is now putting pressure on everybody else to conform to your idea of what masculinity is.
Yeah, if your idea of happiness is what's going on outside of your control, you're really setting yourself up for a rough life. Because your happiness needs to be things you can control. And because if it's not, that's a constant kick in the pants. That's for sure. Be happy, do what you want to do. We're all going to die anyway. That's what I would say.
Memento mori. That is the truth.
Yeah.
Zoltan, thank you so very much. We'll close with that. I really appreciate it. For the listeners, thank you so much for your listenership, for paying attention to our efforts to bring what the modern gentleman should be in the 21st century, and help us spread the word about Zoltan's comedy. He's doing a great job out there. Help us spread the word about the Gentleman's Brotherhood and our mission to make you a better man today. Thanks for listening.